welcome to Brickyard. I'm Andrea Thompson, and today we are continuing with our new series, Intersectional Poetica. This series allows us to get in depth with spoken word artists with a focus on a diversity of topics and themes. So this month, we are celebrating Black History Month with a showcase of work of 4 legends of Canadian spoken word. And today, it is my pleasure to be chatting with Paulina O'Kieffe-Anthony. Hi, Paulina.
Hey, Andrea.
How you
Hi,
doing?
everybody. I'm well. I'm very well. Winding down, getting ready for the end of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, just so everybody knows, we're in the past here. Uh, and when this comes up, we'll be in February, but we're just in December, winding down the year. So I would love to let everybody know a little bit about you. So I'm going to introduce you properly with your bio now. Paulina O'Kieffe-Anthony is an award-winning artist, curator, arts educator, and creative consultant. Her high-level accomplishments include being featured on When Sisters Speak, co-curating Scarborough, the Backbone, as part of Toronto's Year of Public Art, and co-producing the Spoken Soul Festival and representing Toronto as a 2-time national team finalist in the Canadian Festival of Spoken Word. In 2019, she was a TEDx speaker, and in 2020, an excerpt of her play, How Jab Jab Saved the Pretty Mass, is that right, Mass? Mass, yeah, was featured as a part of Peace of Minds Black Women in Theatre Festival. She's a recipient of the Toronto Community Foundation Vital People Award and was featured on the CBC as one of 150 Black women making herstory, for her contribution to building the art scene in Toronto. So, Paulina, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I always love to start with the question, thinking about our audience. I know we have a lot of students and just kind of beginner lovers of the art form. How did you get your start as a poet, as a spoken word artist?
So I started in spoken word by being brought into I guess, a collective of young artists through a couple of other, like, more senior artists, namely Spin El Poeta, Motion, and another artist named Heather Hermont. They had created this collective called the Rhyme Collective. And so it was a bunch of young poets. We got together, we were learning the art of spoken word. They kind of, I guess, mentored us in like performing, and then we all moved in. A lot of us moved into teaching spoken word, and so that's how I kind of got into it. I've been writing since I was about 7 years old, so always loved writing. But they truly introduced me to the power of like releasing your words on stage. And so when I was about 18, that's how I got started. Yeah,
I love that word, that description, releasing your words on stage. And that actually kind of leads into my next question. I was thinking about the fact that you're a playwright as well as a poet. So I'm curious for you, how do these 2 genres intersect, or, especially for you as the creator?
So after a while of doing poetry, I wanted to get into playwriting. I had this idea for a play, which actually, like, the idea sparked from the end of what I think was going to be a spoken word piece. But I'm like, no, there's more to this story. So I think I need a different kind of medium to tell it. And so I co-wrote this play with my very best friend, Natasha Morris. And so I think the way that in which I create for my play versus the way I create for spoken word poetry, it was a bit of a learning curve for me. With spoken word poetry, I feel it's very freeing. Kind of things just come naturally. It's more connected to, you can have like connections to one specific piece of memory or idea, and it can be one-off. With the play, it's different because all the dialogue, the ideas, and everything have to kind of flow together to tell one longer story. Mm-hmm. There are opportunities in the playwriting to create, monologues and pieces that kind of resemble spoken word poetry, but then I think the process was a little bit more intense for me in terms of writing a play and having to think about characters and having to think about scene and having to think about dialogue is much shorter, right? In these little bits versus like spoken word poetry where I could kind of just continue to go on and on and on about one thing in one time, and it just kind of free flows to me in a particular way with very limited editing. So the process for me with the two are kind of different, but I did try to like figure out ways to kind of connect the storytelling of spoken word into the play a little bit. But I definitely I definitely learned that it was different. They're two different mediums, and they bring out two different parts of my creative brain for sure.
What did you mean by that? Like the connecting spoken word? Was that like an approach or a specific kind of technical?
I think in my specific play, I think folks would say that there are pieces that are like definitely monologues.
Okay.
But when I was writing them, I was tapping into the way that I would write a spoken word piece, right? And how do I tell a story within a story? And then the specific kind of pieces that I have also required additional research in traditional like ways of carnival storytelling, because that's what the play is about.
Okay.
And so I was just kind of like starting some of those pieces where in my roots of spoken word poetry, but then I would have to kind of adjust to kind of the regular playwriting I guess tactics that I have to do.
Okay. What is carnival storytelling? I've never heard that term before.
Yeah, so in the play, we have right at the beginning, we start the play with what we call it's like more of a speech from the character, which is a midnight robber, which is a traditional character of carnival mass, which is, if you're familiar with like Caribana or any type of carnival, you know, there are different characters that came out of carnival. Not a lot of them do you see in contemporary carnival, because we tend to feature what we call pretty mass, which is the feathers and those colorful costumes. But there are also a number of traditional characters that each have like a backstory to them, and then they each have a way that they make their way into carnival and then kind of represent themselves. And the midnight robber character has represents themselves through like we call it a robber speech. And so I was working on that. And to start that, I started with spoken word. Like, I'm like, okay, it's going to be like the way I write spoken word. But actually, there's a particular way that speech has to go. And so I was in Trinidad doing some research around that. And then I had to incorporate that and then incorporate all of that into the play itself. So
that's really fascinating. You know, I'd never heard that before, and I had no idea of that relationship. This like that term "pretty mass" I'd never heard about, and I live actually close to where Caribana happens in downtown Toronto, and I'm like, okay, well that explains the feathers. That's great. That's great. I can't believe I never knew that before. And actually, it makes me think too about something I wanted to ask you about, and you've answered it in a way, but I'd like to see if we can get in a little bit deeper. I was really curious about, because a lot of the work that you do and that you've been celebrated for has to do with your identity as a Black artist. So I was curious about the ways that that feeds into the work that you do as you know, an organizer, as a cultural worker, as well as an artist. And you've just explained one of them, but are there any other ways that that racial identity and creative output merge for you?
yeah, absolutely. I actually think that my racial identity very much is at the forefront of my creativity. For me, being a Black artist means that when I'm doing community organizing or community arts, it's in support of the Black community first and foremost. It means that my experiences in my poetry are going to have, if they're not completely about living or being politicized in a Black body, that some element of that is in there regardless. For me, being a Black artist is one of, like I said, is like really at one of the forefront. So I'm a Black, my race and my gender play a really huge part in the way that I create work, in the way that I curate work, in the way that I tell stories in the way that I organize in the arts community. So they're always at the forefront of my mind and thinking. And so when I'm doing anything, it's also for that art, for that audience. Really, Black women is my main target audience when I'm creating anything or trying to represent anything, because that's the experience I live. And I find it's the experience that really informs a lot of the thoughts and stories that come out of that come out of me when I'm writing poetry or whether I'm writing a play. It's all about my cultural heritage, my racial heritage, and then my gender.
Mm. I'm interested in knowing now a little bit about you were talking about that, the process, your creative process when you're writing a play, and kind of touching on it too when you're talking about how everything is informed by your identity and the intersection of being a woman and being a Black woman. What is the kind of nitty-gritty process when you're writing a spoken word poem? Is it, like experiences that you end up brewing and then they just kind of come out? Is it more like, a cathartic, like you get an inspiration to sit down? What does it look like when you're creating a spoken word piece?
Yeah, when I'm creating spoken word, it can be different. Sometimes something will happen that's so intense, like maybe I read something in the news or something happens to me as a personal experience, and right away it's very cathartic. Like I have to get it out on the paper in this free flowing way. It's the only way that I can actually make sense of my thoughts or process what has happened. Sometimes I'm very specific around, I'm going to write a set of poetry around this particular experience or this particular community or these particular sets of, or these particular sets of experiences of folks that I know. That also includes myself. So it might be a whole poetry set around, let's say, motherhood in particular, and then there'll be instances of like Black motherhood filtered inside of there, but motherhood is like the set of poetry that I'm doing. So I might do a few sets of poetry on that. So it just kind of depends where I am at any particular time of my life. Like if I'm writing for a show versus if I'm writing just creatively for myself, which is not a lot these days because there's so many busy things happening, or if I'm writing in response to something. So I have different processes and they kind of pick and choose for me when they want to come out. And then I just kind of follow that process as it's leading and guiding me in that place.
Do you miss that, because I find as artists, especially as seasoned artists, I love talking to emerging artists and finding out about their experiences. And for myself, as I have been a practicing artist for longer, I found that I was really kind of hungry to get back to that feeling of that urgency, and there's like a wildness to that creative phase of your life. And you were just saying about not writing for yourself. Do you miss that as a more established artist?
Yeah, I miss that as a more established artist, but I don't know that it's because I'm an established artist. I think it's because I've consistently balanced my art with my community arts organizing and practice. And it's really tough to like manage those two kinds of spaces of my brain at the same time. I'm the executive director for a pretty medium to large size arts nonprofit. Right. And so in that space, I'm often using my administrative arts side and organizing side. And it takes a lot of energy to then shut that down and then move into this creative art side, like where you're just an artist. So that's something I'm definitely looking to kind of rectify moving forward, that I'm trying to intentionally carve out space where I'm writing for myself. And whatever that process is going to be, whether it's a cathartic writing, whether it's a response writing, whether it's a series of pieces that I want to write. So it's definitely something I'm trying to reclaim for myself.
Yeah, it's funny. Everybody, all the artists that I talk to, it's always that fine balance of doing the thing that you need to do to put food on the table, and and sometimes it's just something that you really love, that you're passionate about, and then that just kind of pure creative time and finding that balance. And sometimes I talk to people and they're like, oh, I've got so much time, but I'm struggling, or, things are going great in my career, but I have no time to write, and trying to find that sweet spot. And it seems to often move, and we're always kind of trying to find that place. I'm curious about, a lot of the work that you do as an educator and as a role model and mentor. As I said, I'm thinking of this space as a great space for emerging artists. And I was wondering specifically, I think, because you speak so strongly to the experience of the Black woman, for a young Black woman who's just starting out maybe in spoken word and they're just trying to find their voice. Would you have any advice for them?
Yeah, definitely. For those who are starting out as a young Black woman, I think that our voices are so necessary in this world. And we're often shut down a lot. I would say, one, definitely keep writing, keep performing, find spaces that kind of embrace you, and not necessarily only for like poetry for money, right? Find spaces where you can do poetry for the sake of poetry, for the sake of just hearing your voice on a microphone, out loud, getting those things that you are holding inside, outside of you, because that's the real essence of like spoken word poetry. Yes, you can totally make it into a career and make your money off of it. But I think the deep down essence of it, that what's important, particularly for Black women, particularly for young Black women, is that it is a space that allows us to express ourselves and gives us voice in a world that often tries to extinguish our voice or silence us as much as possible. So it is a platform for you to kind of release and use that platform, and where possible, get paid while you use that platform, but definitely use that platform, because I feel like spoken word to me was when I discovered it, was a very freeing art form. I was able to figure out myself. As a young Black woman, I was able to kind of process experiences that were happening to me, process experiences that were happening in the world, and from my lens as a Black woman, and people were listening. And I think that's really important, that you are often in spaces where you find people are listening and responding to you as a Black woman. We need to practice that. Right? Sometimes in our workspaces or other spaces, we're in places where, our voice is minimized or shut down. And so we can actually normalize that for ourselves. So when you step into this arena of spoken word and your voice is not only heard on the stage or on the microphone, but also responded to in this extremely positive, supportive way, I think then you start to normalize that in your life and then expect it in other places and other spaces of your life. And that's really important for us to practice.
That's great. I think this would be a great time for us to hear a piece. Do you have a piece you'd like to share with us?
I do have a piece I'd like to share.
Sweet.
Yeah. So I'm going to share this piece called I Do It for the Culture. And I just love this poem. I don't even remember how I started this poem or started writing it, but I just felt like I was in a space where I'm just super excited to represent all things Blackness. I was excited to see the kinds of things that we as a Black community are able to do to kind of overcome all of the kind of barriers, all of the trauma. Like despite all that, we continue to rise over and over again. It was part of a series of poems in which I was writing about the overcoming of our trauma, about how we survived, how we kind of thrive despite being pushed down on a regular basis. So that's what this poem is called. I Do It for the Culture. So here it is. I do it for the culture, my culture. Creative in the way it cultivates its existence, curates its way back onto the forefront after consistently being pushed back as if it didn't contribute to the cornerstone of society itself. Coerced to be content with scraps it made the most of, now most of it culturally appropriated. I do it for the culture, for all the colors, the curves, the costumes, the culinary creations, the content so controversial it is met with curse words and crosses born on backlash for daring to be Black and defiance Black and subservient, Black and quiet, Black and creative, Black and expressive, Black and excessive, eccentric, everlasting, ever evading, extermination. I do it for the culture, for the parts that were lost, left to be buried in your attempted assimilation, thought to have disintegrated during the burning of our nations, for the parts that stood steadfast, studied in secret, for the parts that were stolen with no acknowledgement, for the parts that were created out of the survival from our ingenuity, new traditions birthed from resistance. You can't teach this kind of resilience. It only appears in your DNA over lengthy sessions of oppression, something you will never know of. I do it for the culture, for the women who birthed it, for the men that contribute to it, for the children who will carry it far into the future, far from the fate it has endured yesterday and today, far from what it has been told it is limited to be. I do it for the racist supporters who think they know but have no clue that hell hath no fury like a Black nation scorned, and even that would be an understatement. Ready to unite, to come up from under the crushing weight of your system, revolution that will be carried on the backs of Black women, you say, rejecting some of our strongest warriors strapped with nothing but AKs, but you can't bring yourself to hashtag say her name, even when the only hope for your future is nestled in the curves of her breasts. And I am here to confess that I very much do it for the culture. My culture, Black culture. Black voices who have been for so long oppressed that we are at the very end of our wits. The sounds of revolution edging closer within our midst, so close to the battlefield. So you're gonna need to be real clear about which side you're gonna choose. See me, I already know I do it for the culture. Scream every painful word as loud as I want to, because we are at a point that as a culture, there isn't nothing left to lose.
Nice, nice, nice. Wow. That was powerful. That was beautiful. Yeah, it's like an anthem. And I love the repetition coming back to that full circle, you know, like an underline each time behind your thesis. I love it. I love it.
Thesis, indeed.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So what are you working on now? What's next? What's next?
What am I working on now? So I'm working on a lot of things, because as those people who know me, I'm always working on a lot of things. Never one thing, many things always. So one thing I'm working on is trying to wrap up this spoken word album that I've been working on called You Are Mother. It's a look at motherhood and all the different ups and downs through spoken word poetry. I will be picking back up work on my play with my co-writer in the new year. We kind of shut it down for a bit while COVID was happening because we wanted to do a little bit more research back home in Trinidad. And so now that the borders are open, we can do that. So we'll definitely be picking that back up, finishing it off, and hopefully you'll see a reading happening in the new year, which I'm very excited about. And then the only other work I think I'll be doing is creating space for my own work, my own creative writing, whether it makes it to the stage or not. I think I promised myself that in 2023 is a year of returning back to art making for the sake of art making, which I think is super important for myself as an artist to kind of redevelop. And then in the curation field, just working with my crew at the Spoken Soul Collective. Shout outs to Dwayne Morgan and Randall Ajay. And we have some good stuff lined up for you, but I can't spill the beans, so you'll have to see and follow us at Spoken Soul TO.
Awesome. Nicely done. Nice little plug there. Great summary. Well, thank you so much, Paulina. It's been really nice to sit down and chat with you. I've known you from around the scene for a long time as a mover and shaker. And yeah, it's great that we can get to share some of your work with the people on Brickyard and have you as part of this Black History Month showcase. So you can find out more about Paulina at paulinaokieffe.com. If you want to find out how to spell that correctly, look below. It will be in the description box. You can follow her on Instagram at Paulina O'Kieffe, Twitter at Paulina_O'Kieffe. O'Kieffe. And if you would like to hear more, we were just chatting about her full set, which, because we are in the past, is not up yet, but in the future, when you watch this, it might be. So check out Brickyard, check out our Black History Month playlist, our Black Artist Showcase. For more work by Paulina, we're going to have, like you just had a little tiny appetizer, you're going to get to have a full meal plus dessert in the set. So, and please check back. I'm not sure what the order is, but we've got a lot of great artists during this Black History Month showcase. This is part of this Intersectional Poetica program. So we're going to be doing, we've got an Indigenous Month showcase, an Asian Heritage Month showcase coming up. There's lots of stuff happening and you want to know about it. So please check out brickbooks.ca. You can sign up for the Brickyard newsletter. And also don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because we are trying to monetize, because we are trying to make money, because we want to share it with the artists. And we want this showcase to grow and grow. Right now, we've got one of the best, I think, archives of Canadian spoken word artists happening here. And I think one of the only ones that have a profit sharing policy in place. So we're trying to make that the norm. Please help us and support us and like share and send it to your friends and subscribe for reals. For reals is not a thing. I'm just saying, I really mean it. I want you to subscribe. Okay, so I guess that's it for us today. Thanks again, Paulina.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for having me and for doing this work. I think it's folks like you that are pushing forward the art form and keep making sure that it's, making its place in history. That's why Andrea Thompson is in my poem, one of my poems that you'll see on my set, because she's a legend.
Oh, girl, you're gonna make me cry. Thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you. And thanks everybody for checking out Brickyard. Follow Paulina, see what she's up to, follow Brickyard, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.